numbing, spicy, savory, tender, and hot. Today, we're diving deep into Mapo Tofu, following the classic approach, taking the opportunity to explore what each ingredient brings to the dish and the reasoning behind each step. We start with the tofu, traditionally soft tofu. Not just for the silky texture, but the high moisture content makes it less absorbent, keeping its core light and clean, key to balancing the rich sauce we're about to make. We carefully cube. For the home kitchen, you can use medium firm tofu to make it slightly easier, and cube it however you like. If it breaks, it'll become the natural thickener. We blanch in a bit of salted water. A, to firm the surface. B, depending on how the surface is set, getting rid of some potential bitterness. C, drive off any potential raw bean taste, and the salt would preserve its natural sweetness. Just below boiling point, a minute or two, stove off, we keep it here to minimize the handling. Now the meat, we're using less than 10% of the weight of the tofu. So in terms of purpose, this is much closer to an aromatic. Often beef or pork, Mrs. Chen herself changed her mind a few times. With pork, you'll get a slightly sweeter, rounder profile. With beef, a cleaner taste. Today, we're following a famous hotel recipe from the 1980s. Lean beef, hand minced for better browning. If you're using store-bought mince, leave it uncovered in the fridge for an hour or two. That would dry out the surface, minimizing splashing. Now the actual aromatics, white part of the scallion to form our savory base and to provide some subtle sweetness, minced to integrate into the sauce, ginger for some warm heat and zesty freshness, garlic, deeper umami and later caramelized sweetness. Now the actual stars of the show, the seasonings. Sichuan chili broad bean paste, which was not in the original recipes, but has since become the signature backbone of Mapo Tofu. This brings a ton of umami, heat, fermented complexity, and the famous red color. We chop to form an even paste. Most store-bought versions are pre-chopped, so you can skip this step. Continuing on our bean fest, fermented black beans, classically Sichuan-style water-based fermented black beans, not the Cantonese dried version. They are softer, less salty, more savory, and brings a tiny bit of tang. If you only have access to the Cantonese version, soak them briefly to soften them and use a tiny bit less to have more control over the salt level. Now the original star turned supporting cast, Sichuan dry chili powder for more direct heat, relatively fresher chili aromas, and of course this will help out with the color. Now, to get the ma in mala, Sichuan red peppercorns. And we start this iconic dish by dry toasting them to get the essential oils going. Besides the famous numbing sensation that balances the spiciness of the dish, they also bring an often overlooked citrusy aroma, almost like a roasted grapefruit peel. Give it a minute, you can really smell the grapefruit. Once you can smell the grapefruit, we ground and pound. Now we can cook. Medium-high heat, we add a generous amount of peanut oil, which has a high smoke point and a neutral to nutty flavor. You can use any high smoke point neutral oil. Beef goes into sear. First, to rapidly evaporate the surface moisture. Then, through heat, we develop deeper flavors through the Maillard reaction and later nutty complexity thanks to caramelization. Once this is slightly golden, the hero goes in. Sichuan chili bean paste, the famous oil blooming stage. Just like the beef, we first evaporate most of its water content to concentrate its water-soluble flavors, mostly the umami. Then the oil starts to take on its fat solubles, namely the spiciness, the chili aromas, And of course, the famous color. As we continue to cook, the hot oil starts gently frying the remaining solids. Once again, given the bean proteins, another round of Maillard reaction, more complex flavors, thanks to the natural sugar. One more round of caramelization. Modern-day chili bean pastes are often preserved in oil, so it's important that you adjust the quantity of oil accordingly. Now we do the same with the fermented black beans. But for the color demonstration, this would have gone in at the same time. Now, chili powder goes in slightly later to avoid burning. This has become almost an optional ingredient by now. Once you can see this beautiful hue and smell the complex chili fragrance, the Chinese Holy Trinity goes in. First the ginger, just to release enough moisture for this to drop down closer to boiling point. Then the scallion and the garlic. And we simply cook until fragrant. This is not a sofrito. You want to maintain a bit of the zesty freshness and a bit of pungency. Now the soy fest continues with light soy sauce for more salinity and more umami. And soy sauce is fermented differently to the chili broad bean paste, bringing us a different kind of fermented complexity. And of course, this will start deglassing our pan, mopping up all the beautiful concentrated burn bits. Now, Shaoxing wine for some nutty depth and some oxidized note. You can use dry sherry. This would continue to mop up beautiful flavors. Now, very carefully, tofu goes in. We mix gently. Bring back some temperature, and we taste and adjust the seasoning. Now the starch slurry, classically sweet potato or bean starch, we add gradually, mixing to help the starch fully gelatinize, cook out the starch in the process. It's worth noting that besides the water from the starch slurry and the liquid seasoning we added, this dish has no added liquid. It's an oil-based dish. Look at that. Now, garlic shoot for that garlicky perfume and fresh sweetness. I know it's a huge ask. You can also use scallion green. Stove off before this goes in. And very last minute to preserve the numb, Sichuan peppercorn. You don't have to use it if you don't like it. Add a bit of lemon juice for brightness. Today we followed a classic recipe just to demonstrate the principles, but cook it once, make it your own, use ingredients you like. It's a wonderful, wonderful dish. Please, please cook it.